It's good to be back here in the studio. For one, it's warmer. Plus, the situation in Ukraine is spiraling. Embassies are shutting down. People are being asked to leave. Airlines are wrapping up operations. At least some of them are. If you believe the Americans, there will be war this week. But then, given America's recent intelligence failures, it's hard to believe them. From Afghanistan to Iraq, they've got it wrong every single time. So is this just war hysteria? Honestly, it's hard to say. The Russian build-up on the Ukrainian border is not a joke. There's some serious firepower on display and troops ready to overwhelm Kiev on Moscow's command. So it's still a 50-50. Ukraine continues to host world leaders, hoping to change the course of this crisis with talks. Shuttle diplomacy has not delivered so far. The president of Ukraine has made some fresh demands. Talks with Russia, he says, and an invite to the US president. Neither may happen. But the story is moving fast. On Gravitas tonight, we bring you up to speed with a conflict that we tracked for you on Ground Zero. Also on the show tonight, India has banned another 54 Chinese apps. Are these half measures? Is the urgency to hold China accountable missing? We discuss Delhi's strategy or the lack of it. Another horror story from Pakistan. A man is stoned to death for alleged blasphemy. He is said to have burned some pages of the Quran. Canada's Freedom Convoy is going places. Similar protests in Europe, Israel and Australia. We tell you how Justin Trudeau has turned a bunch of anti-vaxxers into global heroes. And this year will see a record number of weddings, the highest in 40 years, more than 2.5 million in the US alone. A special report on what's fueling the wedding boom. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Russian teenage skating sensation Kamila Valieva cleared by the Court of Arbitration for Sport to continue competing in the Beijing Olympics, despite failing a doping test.
It means that no provisional suspension should be imposed on the skater.
The International Olympic Committee says there will be no medal ceremony if Valieva ends up in the top 3. Global equity markets tanked heavily on Monday as fears intensify over a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. The price of Brent crude soared to a 7-year high of $95 per barrel. Sensex lost more than 1,700 points, while Nifty was also down by over 3%. Israeli soldiers shot dead a 17-year-old Palestinian boy during confrontations near the town of Jenin in the occupied West Bank, said the Palestinian Health Ministry, in what Israel described as an operation to demolish the home of a terrorist suspected of a recent attack. India and the UAE are poised to deepen their trade ties this week with the signing of the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his UAE counterpart are expected to hold a virtual meeting to announce the bilateral trade pact. Afghanistan's former president Hamid Karzai calls the White House order to unfreeze $3.5 billion in Afghan assets in the United States for families of 9/11 victims, an atrocity against Afghans. Karzai asked Americans to urge the U.S. president to rescind the order. The latest wave of COVID cases has overwhelmed Hong Kong, says leader Carrie Lam, adding that cases had surged by some 20 times over the past 2 weeks. Lam said her administration would coordinate with Chinese officials to tackle the crisis. The Indian Space and Research Organization launches its first space mission of 2022, successfully sending a new Earth observation satellite to space, designed to provide high-quality images under all weather conditions. A number of Olympic events were cancelled or postponed after heavy and rare snowfall swept across China's northern regions, including the host city, ruining the original plan for all the snow used at Games to be entirely artificial. The Los Angeles Rams claimed a first Super Bowl title in 23 years after beating Cincinnati Bengals 23-20. The Bengals seemed set to win their maiden title, but the Rams' star-studded roster came up clutch when it mattered. With just 1 minute and 25 seconds left, Cooper Kupp scored his second touchdown to give the Rams a second NFL title. Cup was named the MVP, while 36-year-old Sean McVay became the youngest coach to win a Super Bowl. Scottie Scheffler snatched a maiden PGA Tour title after coming through a dramatic playoff against Patrick Cantlay to win the Phoenix Open, after failing to win in regulation at the final hole. The American drained a 25-foot birdie on the third playoff hole to secure a long-awaited victory.
The drumbeats of war are getting louder in Ukraine. America says invasion is imminent. Russia could strike any moment. But the European partners are more skeptical. They're still betting on diplomacy. It's just like last week. The crisis is taking dual tracks, diplomacy and deterrence. Let's talk about diplomacy first. On Saturday, US President Joe Biden spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin had more complaints. Biden had more warnings. In the end, there was no breakthrough. The next day, Biden dialed Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. He briefed him on the Putin phone call. What happened next is interesting. Kiev says Zelensky invited Biden to Ukraine, sort of like a morale booster. Washington, though, made no mention of this invite. They completely ignored it. And you can understand why. The United States is drumming up panic. Their media says Russia will invade this Wednesday. The White House says it's just a matter of time.
Said before, we are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it. I will not comment on the details of our intelligence information, but I do want to be clear. It could begin during the Olympics.
Why has America turned alarmist? Maybe they haven't. Maybe this is all part of Western propaganda, pressurize Putin to show his hand. Whatever the reason, panic is now spreading. Around a dozen nations are asking their citizens to leave Ukraine. This includes Britain, Germany, Italy, Canada, Australia and Japan. Airlines are also avoiding Ukraine. Dutch carrier KLM has cancelled flights to Kiev. Germany's Lufthansa is considering the same. And these are not good signs for Ukraine. Foreigners fleeing your country, flights avoiding your airspace, all of this usually means only one thing: war is imminent. But Ukraine wants to keep the morale high. They're not buying America's panic, which is why Zelensky invited Biden to Kiev. It would have sent a strong message to Putin. Instead, another Western leader landed in Kiev today, and let me add, not a popular one. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. His reluctance to take on Russia has enraged Ukrainians. He's refused to send military aid. He's non-committal on cancelling Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline. So this visit was always going to be tough. Scholz had to prove himself to two groups, to his Western partners and to the Ukrainian people. Their anger was perfectly summed up by this tweet. It was written by Ukraine's envoy to Germany. The title is perfect. German hypocrisy, he says. Berlin exports goods worth 366 million euros to Russia, but they have given zero military aid for Ukraine, unless you count the helmets. How does Scholz plan to change this dynamic? With the same broken record, sanctions.
It's necessary to be clear, to say clearly that in the case of military aggression against Ukraine that endangers its territorial integrity and sovereignty will result in hard reactions and sanctions that we have carefully prepared and that we can put into effect immediately, together with our allies in Europe and NATO.
With allies like Germany, you have no option but to prepare for war, and that's what Ukraine is doing. President Zelensky has reiterated his bid to join the NATO. He says it is the only way Ukraine can secure itself. Germany, on the other hand, wants talks. Chancellor Scholz says he's willing to discuss European security with Vladimir Putin. That's where he's heading next, to Moscow. On Sunday, a new shipment of military aid arrived in Kiev. Guess what's inside those boxes? Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. It's an insurgent staple. You can take out enemy jets with precision. Stingers have changed the tide in many wars. The best example is Afghanistan, a country many Ukrainians talk about nowadays. They think the situations are similar. In Afghanistan, the army outnumbered the Taliban. The army had better weapons than the Taliban. Same in Ukraine. Russia has more soldiers. Russia has better weapons. But if the disorganized Taliban could beat the US-backed army, surely Ukraine's army can beat the Russians. That's what people in Kiev say. They're bullish. But it's a tall ask, frankly. Across the border, the Russian war machine continues to mobilize. In Belarus, the military drills are expanding. Russian and Belarusian fighter jets were patrolling the skies. Down below, tanks conducted firing drills. So ground and air covered. What about the waters? That's happening further south. Russian warships have already reached Crimea. On Sunday, a Russian submarine also arrived. Put together, around 30 Russian vessels are parked in the Black Sea, enough for a full-scale naval blockade. Despite all of this build-up, all this posturing, Russia continues to deny any plan to invade. So Kiev is asking for clarity. And they have triggered a special European Security Pact. It's called the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE. Russia has also signed this pact. It's a signatory. The OSCE has a special clause on clarity. Suppose a European country is moving its troops or conducting military drills, other nations can demand answers. Basically, they can ask them, what are you up to? And Ukraine has now triggered this clause. They want a meeting with Russia within 48 hours, but Moscow has refused to attend. This conflict is not just playing out in Ukraine, by the way. It's also playing out at the United Nations. It's playing out at the Olympics. It will also play out at the Munich Security Conference this week. They call it Davos for Defense. It's being held since 1963, but this year Russia is not participating. At the Olympics, all the controversy is about this athlete, Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva. Before the games began, she submitted her samples for testing, but the results came out only on the 8th of February, after she had completed her event. It turned out that she had failed the dope test. A court of arbitration was hastily put together, and Valieva was cleared to compete. Why wasn't she disqualified? Because she's a minor. The United States has expressed disappointment over the verdict. They're planning legal action themselves. Now, on the face of it, this is a totally unrelated incident, a military build-up near Ukraine and a doping scandal in Beijing. But that's how Cold Wars work, you see. There's no fighting on the ground. So the rivalry has to play out somewhere. It plays out in culture, in politics, sports, movies. Even if the standoff is resolved, the animosity between the West and Russia is here to stay. And caught in the middle is Ukraine, or countries like Ukraine. Ukraine is living under a constant threat. How will it defend itself if Russia invades? It's betting on killer robots, drones that could give it an edge over the Russian armed forces. Chief among them is the Bayraktar TB2. It's a Turkish-made drone capable of striking targets from miles away. Last year, Ukraine used it to successfully attack a pro-Russian rebel convoy. Today, as it braces itself for a possible Russian invasion, Kiev expects this drone to offset the enormous military advantage that Moscow enjoys. Here's a report.
This video is from October 2021. It shows the Ukrainian military striking a pro-Russian rebel convoy in the war-torn Donbas region. The strike involved a powerful new weapon. This one, the Bayraktar TB2, a Turkish-made drone capable of striking targets from miles away. 3 months since Ukraine first used it, thousands of Russian troops have amassed at its borders. They're waiting for Moscow's orders to launch an offensive. This drone is back in the news as well. It is expected to offset the enormous military advantage that Russia enjoys. We are not saying this, the Ukrainians are. Igor Kopitin is the head of Ukraine's parliamentary subcommittee on defense modernization. He says these drones could give Ukraine a decisive edge over Russia. How exactly? To understand that, we'll have to look at what these drones are capable of. Made in Turkey with international parts, the Bayraktar TB2 has been a tactical game-changer in numerous conflicts. This includes the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War, also the ongoing civil wars in Syria and Libya. In all 3 cases, Russian forces have struggled to take it down. Here's why. The TB2 can stay quietly aloft for 24 hours and reach a maximum altitude of 25,000 feet. A remote operator can control its actions from 185 miles away under ideal conditions. It can laser locate targets from 12 miles away, which can help it evade Russian anti-aircraft systems. This drone can also fire its own guided missiles. And it can take off from roads, not just airport runways. So, how many of these drones does Ukraine have? Roughly 20 so far, but more are on the way. On a visit to Kyiv this month, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan formalized a deal to co-produce these drones with Ukraine. A Ukrainian aerospace firm has agreed to provide the engines. This deal is said to have rattled Moscow. U.S. intel reports suggest that Russia could use these drones to stage a possible false flag operation and create a pretext for invading Ukraine. How effective will these drones be if this happens? Truth be told, not much. The TB2 may be a potent weapon, but it may prove futile before the Russian juggernaut. Moscow has far better air defense capabilities. Thousands of anti-aircraft missiles, self-propelled guns, and radio jammers. And considering how much the Russians loathe the TB2, these drones, along with their units, transmitters, and crew, would undoubtedly be on top of Russia's list of targets. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now, Russia seems to have clarity when it comes to Ukraine. It does not want Ukraine to join the NATO. Kiev, too, seems to know what it wants and what it doesn't. It has spelled out the red lines. But here in India, there seems to be a lot of grey in New Delhi's strategy for its northern rival. I'm talking about China. Earlier today, India banned 54 apps. I would like to say 54 Chinese apps. But pundits online seem to disagree. So allow me to address that confusion first. Here is one of the apps that has been banned by India. Garena Free Fire. It's a last man standing type of game, or what gamers call Battle Royale. Garena Free Fire is similar to PUBG. In 2019, it became the most downloaded mobile game, and currently it has more than 1 billion downloads. So why did India ban this game? Netizens have a lot of questions. They say this game is owned by a Singapore-based company, and they're right. But here's something you should know. While Sea Limited is a Singapore-based company, the founders are Chinese-born Singaporean citizens. What's more, Tencent is the company's largest shareholder. Now, I would be insulting your intelligence if I reminded you that Tencent is a Chinese tech firm. So while this game is hosted by a Singapore-based company, there's a good chance that the data is ultimately going to Chinese servers. Some of the other banned apps are owned by Alibaba and NetEase. Again, Chinese companies. So that was the devil in the detail. Now let's look at the bigger picture. Why did India ban these apps? Because they were reportedly posing a threat to India's security. You would remember 2020 was the first time that India banned Chinese apps. TikTok headlined that ban. India cited threat to its sovereignty, integrity, defense, security of state and public order. The action followed the Galwan clashes. It's been 2 years since the total number of banned Chinese apps in India has crossed 300. In China too, there have been rapid developments. Let me remind you of two recent ones. An Indian teenager was kidnapped by Chinese troops and the Galwan commander was honored with the Olympic torch. There's also the new Chinese border law and the latest Chinese attempt at renaming areas falling under the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. We've covered all of this on the show. Clearly, there's been an uptick in Chinese hostility. And you don't need to be a geopolitical expert to figure this out. Here's something else a layman has been able to tell. Back in India, there is still no consensus on how to deal with China. Lawmakers are yet to arrive at an agreement. Those in power have said very little about China in public. While on one hand, New Delhi is building up border infrastructure, taking measures to protect Indian companies from hostile takeover, pushing for self-reliance to secure supply chains. On the other hand, India is also doing record trade with China. Bilateral trade with Beijing grew 43.3% last year. So the signals are mixed. And that is not to say that India has been silent to Chinese hostility. There have been sharp retorts at times. Take the renaming of places in Arunachal, for example. When China announced names for 15 more places in Arunachal Pradesh, New Delhi shot back. It said assigning invented names to places does not alter the fact that Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India, all of which is fine. When China fielded the Galwan commander as an Olympic torchbearer, India announced a diplomatic boycott of the Genocide Games. State broadcaster Doordarshan also cancelled the live telecast of the opening and closing ceremony. And now India has banned Chinese apps because they were posing a threat to India. But do you notice a trend here? All of these actions are reactive, not assertive, not proactive. There is no urgency to hold China accountable. India, for example, had a chance to punish China at the United Nations Security Council, but it chose to abstain from voting on Uyghurs. What explains this? China is up to no good, and sending mixed signals to this rival will not help. China only understands the language of strength. And I'm not even talking about the military kind. India can leverage a lot. I'll wrap with one example. Very recently, India's top medical regulator warned students against enrolling in Chinese universities. China, you see, has not opened its borders to Indian students, and India does not recognize online medical courses. That leaves a lot of students in the lurch. So now India is warning students in advance to save their careers. Such proactiveness, when displayed in geopolitics, can be game-changing. Meanwhile, congratulations are in order because Canada's Justin Trudeau has done the impossible. He has turned a fringe anti-vax movement in Canada into a global campaign. I'm talking about the Freedom Convoy. It started around late January. Thousands of Canadian truckers drove into Ottawa. They had one demand: take back the vaccine mandates. Justin Trudeau had two options: reach out to the protesters or crack down. Well, Trudeau invented a third option. He fled. First, he was silent for days. Then he tweeted from his secret location. He refused any kind of talks with the anti-vaxxers, which is fair enough. But Trudeau's decision came late. By now, the truckers had besieged the capital. They had blocked major highways with the United States. Trudeau's confusion allowed this protest to grow. And this is the result. A global campaign. Freedom convoys are popping up all over the world now, in Israel, in Belgium, America, France, Australia. They're all demanding the same thing: no vaccine mandates. Let me show you what's happening in Europe. The convoy kicked off in Paris. Hundreds of cars arrived at the Arc de Triomphe. And they kept blaring their horns. They unfurled the French flag. It was complete chaos. Soon the police were deployed. The protesters were cleared with tear gas and batons. Take a look at how it played out. The Freedom Convoy was driven out of Paris. Their next stop was Brussels. Dozens of cops are stationed outside the European Union headquarters. Checkpoints were set up en route to the Belgian capital. Clearly, Europe is bracing for chaos. In Greece, the protests took a different form. Thousands of unvaccinated health workers marched through Athens. They sang, they danced. But don't be fooled by their displays. At the end of the day, these people are anti-science. They're putting themselves and others at risk. The Freedom Convoy is the perfect setting for America's far-right groups. In fact, they've already joined in. American truckers are planning to mimic their Canadian counterparts. If Canada's protests were so disruptive, you can only imagine what will happen in the US. So there are two takeaways from this movement. Number one, it exposes the West's unscientific and arrogant temperament. Just think about it. You have millions of vaccines locked up. You have the power to end this pandemic. Yet your people are driving so-called freedom convoys. They're fighting against vaccination. Clearly, the messaging and the leadership failed. And number two, it exposes the hypocrisy of Western leaders. Let me show you two sets of pictures. One is from Paris, the other is from the US, the US-Canada border. In both places, the police cracked down. There was tear gas. There was intimidation. There were clashes. Do you know what was missing? The lectures on morality, no statement condemning the government response, no request to talk with the protesters. In fact, most Western countries demanded the opposite.
President Biden and I both agree that for the security of people and the economy, these blockades cannot continue. So make no mistake, the border cannot and will not remain closed. Everything is on the table because this unlawful activity has to end, and it will end.
How convenient is that? When blockades happen in Canada, they're unlawful. When they happen in India, it's freedom of expression. The fact is, law and order is supreme, whether in India, Canada, France or South Africa. It's time the West realized this. Imagine if these pictures were from Baghdad or Cairo or New Delhi. Trudeau would have been rallying on Twitter. Joe Biden would have been lecturing from the White House. But in this case, they are in full agreement. The protests must end. The border must be reopened. And just to be clear, we're not saying that Trudeau's decision is wrong. Cutting off highways is totally unacceptable. We are saying the same principle should apply to every country. If Canada's blockades are illegal, so are India's. If Canada can use the police to restore daily life, so can India. That is what the West must realize and accept. Instead, Justin Trudeau dabbled in confusion. He hid, he condemned, but he never acted decisively, and decisive does not just mean crackdowns. Even talks can be a decisive option. By opting for neither, Trudeau let this movement grow. He made heroes out of these anti-science hooligans. It's ironic if you think about it. The poster boy of woke sparks a global anti-vax movement. Over in India, the country's largest life insurance company is going public. We're talking about the LIC, the Life Insurance Corporation of India. In March, it's expected to make its initial public offering, IPO. Now, there's a lot of unknowns about this decision. Questions like, why is the LIC going public in the first place? How big will this IPO be? How many shares will be on offer? And how can policyholders claim those shares? Our next report tells you all that you need to know.
On the 19th of June 1956, the Parliament of India passed an act to create the Life Insurance Corporation of India, LIC, an investment corporation aimed at making life insurance reasonable and affordable for all Indians. Over the years, this corporation became a household name. It grew into an insurance behemoth with a strong grip on the market. Despite the entry of several private players, even today, LIC's market share stands at 64.1% in terms of premiums, making it the biggest life insurer in the country. If these feats weren't enough, LIC is now set to hit another big milestone. The company has filed its draft Red Herring Prospectus, DRHP, for an initial public offering or IPO. If you're someone who doesn't understand how this works, here's a detailed breakdown of what's about to happen. LIC is going public, meaning its shares will soon be up for sale. The state-owned company is also offering millions of its policyholders a chance to invest. When is this happening? Most likely in March 2022. That's when the IPO is expected to be launched. Why is this happening? To bolster the government's coffers drained by the pandemic. India has recorded its worst recession since independence due to COVID-19. LIC's IPO will give the government some much-needed financial relief. So how many shares will the government sell? The government of India owns 100% stake in the insurer. It will sell 5% of its stake in the IPO, and up to 10% of the shares will be reserved for policyholders. How can policyholders claim this offer? By making their bid under the policyholders' quota. All they have to do is link their PAN card details with life insurance policies. So how big will this IPO be? The biggest ever to hit the Indian stock markets. Reports say the listing is expected to raise 65,000 crores, making LIC the biggest listed financial service provider in India. How will the company benefit? IPO documents filed with SEBI indicate that LIC may be valued in excess of 12.5 lakh crore. making it more valuable than all other listed government-owned entities. But a few uncertainties remain over this move, such as questions on whether investment decisions will be made by the LIC management without any government interference. It's also unclear if LIC will be able to retain its market share, given the increased competition for younger consumers from new and tech-savvy entrants in the market. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, a crime called blasphemy has taken yet another life. Over the weekend, a man was stoned to death for an alleged act of blasphemy. Alleged. Before we delve into the story, I must warn you, the images are disturbing. They show an enraged mob of Islamists attacking the victim with clubs, bricks and batons. This happened in the Khanewal district of Pakistan's Punjab province. Reports say the fanatics assaulted the man for several hours and then hanged his corpse from a tree to set an example. The victim has been identified as 41-year-old Mushtaq Ahmed. He belonged to a nearby village. Reports say that he had been mentally unstable for the last 15 years. On the 12th of February, he was arrested by the local police for allegedly burning a few pages of the Quran. While he was in prison, news about his crime, alleged crime, began to spread. A mob gathered outside the police station asking the police to hand him over to them, which they did in order to protect themselves. At least that's what the police now say. They did it to protect themselves. The man was then paraded on the streets, tied to a pole and tortured, beaten to death. Like I said, the images are disturbing, and I can't decide what is more outrageous, the fact that a mentally unstable man was killed over blasphemy, or the fact that the police facilitated this by doing nothing. They acted as mute spectators. What's also important to note here is that this victim did not belong to any minority community. He was not a Hindu or Sikh living in Pakistan, a Muslim. He was a Muslim like his attackers. Will the Pakistani Prime Minister call this attack Islamophobic? Will the international bodies condemn this killing now? I say this because last we checked, no one from the UNHRC or the US IRF or even Amnesty for that matter has issued a single statement over this killing. So here's a reminder for them. Blasphemy has become an excuse for acts of brutality in Pakistan every few months. In December last year, a Sri Lankan national was burnt alive in Pakistan's Sialkot. What for? He allegedly desecrated Islamic posters which contained the name of Prophet Muhammad. A month before that, in November 2021, a police station in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was burned down by a mob of Islamists because the police refused to hand over a blasphemy accused to them. And in August last year, 2021, an 8-year-old boy was charged with desecrating a temple and sentenced to jail. That's right, they imprisoned a minor over allegations of blasphemy. And it does not end there. In 2014, a Christian couple was killed by a mob for allegedly desecrating the Quran. In 2013, an entire Christian colony was torched after some inhabitants were accused of blasphemy. In 2010, 250 Hindus were forced to convert by their employer after Muslims began boycotting eatables that they were manufacturing over accusations of blasphemy. If we put all of these incidents together, and there are many more of these, there have been more than 44 extrajudicial killings in Pakistan over blasphemy, 44 lives lost in the name of protecting the faith. This is according to a report by the Center for Social Justice in Lahore. So when will Pakistan learn that what it really insults is Islam in the name of this cruelty? Perhaps when these Islamists knock on the doors of those running the country. Now, those Islamists do come knocking. Who will Pakistan turn to? Most likely China. They are indebted to Beijing, both politically and financially. But not every country is so desperate. Some are gradually realizing the pitfalls of partnering with China. Tonight, we are focusing on one such country, the Philippines. It's a very important country in the Pacific, close to Taiwan, bound by the South China Sea, and fed up with Beijing's bullying. So it's a perfect combination, the Philippines. Recently, the Philippine Senate announced a major decision. It deferred the ratification of RCEP. That is short for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, called RCEP. Now, the RCEP is basically a mega free trade deal. Broadly speaking, it includes two groups. One is the ASEAN, and two, ASEAN's free trade partners, which includes the likes of India, Japan, China, and Australia. That's around 16 nations in all. Put together, they make up 1/3 of the global GDP. The idea was to build on this, to create an integrated free market between these 16 nations. I know it sounds like a good plan, but as always, there's just one problem. And that problem is called China. Beijing wants to use the RCEP to flood foreign markets to counter U.S. influence in the Pacific. So India walked out of this deal. And something similar is happening in the Philippines. A, they're worried about China spreading its tentacles. And B, their farmers and businesses are protesting. So the Senate has decided to defer the ratification. Now, nobody knows what will happen next. Maybe the protests will be resolved, or maybe the Philippines will leave RCEP. Either way, the larger picture cannot be ignored. The Philippines is moving further away from China. And this could be a big opportunity for India. In fact, India's Foreign Minister, S. Jaishankar, was in Manila today. He met with his Filipino counterpart, Teddy Locsin. Here's what the Indian Foreign Minister tweeted after the meeting. "We are entering a new phase of our partnership," he said. "Its basis is the mutuality of national security and development aspirations." Now, this relationship has always had a lot of potential. Historical ties between the people, cultural exchanges, but two things were missing: trade and military cooperation. Bilateral trade was around $2 billion in 2020. Only 6th largest among the ASEAN nations. But recently, things have changed. Both countries are looking to sign a preferential trade agreement. And last month, they signed a major defense deal. We told you about it. The Philippines bought India's BrahMos missiles for $375 million. It was important for two reasons. Number one, this was the first foreign order for BrahMos. And number two, the missiles were bought to deter China. It was a diplomatic and strategic coup for India. You see, ties built on defense are the strongest. Case in point, India and Russia. This relationship, India and Russia, has survived so many changes: the Cold War, the fall of the Soviet Union, the decline of Russian power, and today the crisis in Ukraine. And through all of it, the relationship has remained strong. New Delhi must aim to build something similar with the Philippines. It's a fellow democracy, it's an Indo-Pacific nation, and just like India, they know what it's like to be China's neighbor. Having said that, a lot depends on the alternatives. If Manila leaves RCEP, do they have another option? Take vaccines, for instance. Last year, China donated millions of doses to the Philippines. Remember, this was in the middle of a naval conflict. If the Philippines abandons China, who will fill this gap? The alliance of democracies must step up. Groups like the Quad must create effective alternatives to China. If not, the movement against Beijing will remain wavering. And we're going to end the show tonight on a lighter and, you could say, brighter note. Have you noticed how social media is full of wedding posts these days? So many people are getting married. Every time you check your feed, there's a new wedding or engagement post. If nothing, at least a save the date. A record number of couples are getting married this year, at least 2.5 million in the United States alone. Is this on expected lines, or did the pandemic change something? Our next report tells you.
Know a couple that's engaged? $10 says they will be married by the year end. 2.5 million couples in the United States are walking down the aisle this year. That's the highest number of weddings since 1984. What happened? The Wuhan virus pandemic. It ruined wedding plans. Couples ended up spending their wedding day in lockdown. Those who had no plans of getting married immediately decided to take the leap after spending the lockdown together. So the record number of weddings in 2022 is a mix of both pushed dates and new engagements. More of the former, less of the latter. So there are wedding bells ringing. Families are waltzing to it, and and the wedding industry is not complaining. It needed to hear I do's after 2 years of lull. Before the pandemic struck, there would be at least 2.1 million weddings in the United States each year. In 2020, the number reduced to 1.3 million. In 2021, it increased slightly to 1.93 million. That said, hosting 2.5 million weddings in 2022 won't be a cakewalk. Florists and photographers are complaining about being overbooked. Some are already working overtime. A Minneapolis-based wedding planner named Lane Palm told the media her team is tired of organizing 3 weddings every weekend. Unlike American weddings, Indian weddings often last the entire weekend, if not spill over to the next week. The Wuhan virus pandemic shrunk big fat Indian weddings. Couples decided to not wait until 2022 to seal the deal. The Indian wedding industry bounced back in the winter of 2021. Cities like Hyderabad, Mumbai and Kolkata saw a record number of weddings. Never before had Kolkata recorded 180,000 weddings in a single year. The trend is likely to continue this year too. America or India tying the knot is going to be a dearer in 2022. Couples worldwide will have to shell out more. How much, you ask? Estimates say up to 15%. You can blame that bill on the virus from China. The sudden increase in weddings has increased the cost of wedding-related services. We are talking about the cost of flowers, decor, event planners, venues, etc. Reports in American papers say most popular venues are booked out until 2023. Some are offering incentives to couples who choose to get married on weekdays instead. Back in India, religious calendars dictate wedding dates. Weekday or weekend, it does not matter. Auspicious dates are limited, and the competition to book the best is more fierce. India or America, Wedding 2022 is a game of fastest fingers first. If you want your dream wedding, start making those calls already.
I think that's a good note to wrap on, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.